So with the early access, Dawntrail is here, and so people are going through the story, and that includes me. And now that I made it past the early portion of the story, I want to give my fresh first impressions of the new expansion so that not only can I share what I think of it, but compare it to how I'll feel down the road after I finish the story in its whole and once the expansion is over completely. That being said, I am going to try to avoid as many spoilers as possible, keeping everything I talk about rather vague, and though I'll be talking about the first dungeon and the trial, I'm not actually going to show it. At most, I might be using some footage of the first 3 areas of the game. Again, I don't want to actually spoil the story for people, I just want to talk about my initial impressions of it. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Starting off, let's talk about the story, since it was the thing people were the most uncertain about going into Dawntrail, because, there was this fear at the conclusion of Endwalker that you can't really follow that up, because how do you go from, fighting a universal level threat in the depths of space to coming back home and just doing a normal thing? And this was a genuine thing that they had to tackle. How do you match that energy and intensity of a story that you just ended when starting a new one? And, it was a struggle that they definitely had to address going into Dawntrail, and I have to say, so far they've done so brilliantly. Now, this is going to be some very slight spoilers, so I'll have a time that you can skip to, but I'm not really going to be talking about any events in the actual story, just more so the role that we as the Warrior of Light play in the story. But if you're worried about any spoilers, just skip to this time. With that, 3, 2, 1, here we go. So the thing that they decided to do that's brilliant is that we're not the hero of this story. We're not the protagonist of Dawntrail. The protagonist of Dawntrail is Wook Lamont. And to quote one of my FC members, we're basically the mentor figure of this story. We're not the one going on the journey, we're guiding her on her journey. And that's a brilliant way to do it, because we're kind of taking up the role that Hades entrusted to us. We're becoming Azim. We're traveling the world, inspiring others to reach their greater potential. The same way that Vana pushed our original selves into becoming Azim, and the same way that our original selves pushed Hades into becoming Emet Selk. So the fact that we're becoming this guiding figure, guiding a new hero, a new traveler, a new adventurer on their own journey to awaken the greatness that's within, is such a brilliant way to handle our character after being this legendary figure that literally saved the universe. So the reason that this journey has any stakes is because it's not our journey to just roll through. It's Wook Lamont's. That, again, I can't talk about how much I love this, which is equally met by the second part that I love. With us being in this mentor role, no longer the true protagonist, they've given us presence. We're no longer the nameless adventurer that no one respects. We're the hero of Eorzea. We're the warrior of light. And though we're taking a back seat to Wook Lamont in the story, anytime that a conflict gets serious and we as the player feel that we need to step in, the tone very much changes. Characters will note that that adventure is too much to deal with. Our very presence will bring that unnecessary conflict to a halt, and that is something I love. I love that they're giving our character this presence, this recognition of our strength. We are the hero that we are in the story, and that is so brilliant. I really cannot express how much I love this little detail, and it's something they make clear. They're giving a lot more focus on our character anytime these moments happen. We use our presence to demand respect and bring an end to certain conflicts. It's great. I cannot state how much I love the direction that they're going, and I hope that it continues, especially if we're going to continue this line of us being this mentor role. Obviously, if we do step back into that seat of the true protagonist at some point, that might change, but as of now, again, I can't state just how much I love how they decided to handle the problem of us being this, God-stopping warrior. But I'm not going to harken too much on it anymore. I've already kind of said more than I want to. And so with that, I want to move into the other part of a good story, which is the characters. And again, this is something that Dawntrail so far has done a fantastic job at. All the major characters, people that have significance, whether a side or main, are all just fantastic. There are so many memorable characters in this story so far, and all of them are enjoyable. And in fact, one of the side characters has become my favorite character. Anytime he shows up on screen, I am just absolutely gleeful. I love him. His joke doesn't get old. It's just great. Like, all the characters have been fantastic, and this includes the main characters. You know, you're introduced to the main characters of the story basically from the start, and you know, almost immediately it establishes the ones that you're gonna like, the ones that you're curious about, and the one that you're gonna hate. He sucks. And you know, it builds upon all these characters as you're going through. Like I said, I am still early in it, and I am heavily invested into all these characters. I have several that I love, and you know, they keep introducing new people, and it's just great. Like, all the characters, like, so many characters are just absolutely phenomenal in Dawntrail so far. And to be fair, that's kind of the point. A big part of the story of Dawntrail so far is learning about the people and the cultures of Tyrell, and so having all these characters be memorable is like fantastic, and I can't wait to see what else they're going to do. And since I mentioned the character that I love, I also need to talk about the fact that the other brilliant thing that the story has done is that it's leaning much more into humor and a lighthearted nature, which is the other vital detail that I think is going to be the success of Dawntrail. Because the thing that Dawntrail really needed to do, and that it has so far done after Endwalker, was distinguish itself, and the best way to do that was for it to be lighthearted. I think that's the main reason that they chose this summer break theme, because going from Shadowbringers, which was, you know, melancholy and sad, a destroyed world, and then into Endwalker, this despair-ridden, you know, a story that's all about despair and the fall of worlds and the heat death of the universe, that was the end of that story. And so if we went into another expansion, like say if we went into the Void for an expansion, another dark and dreary thing, it would have been too similar to Endwalker, and it would have been a lot easier to compare it to that expansion, which is a bad thing. We needed to distinguish ourselves. We needed a Realm Reborn, not a Shadowbringer, something to build the lore, to build this new story, not, you know, a payoff for a story that hasn't been written. And by using comedy, tackling different themes than the previous expansions, they've done a fantastic job with that so far. So again, the story so far, the story, characters, and how the story is being handled so far, obviously I'm still in the beginning, I've loved. I think it's going in a great direction. They could go off the rails. It is 14. We all know Solution 9 exists. Don't know how the hell that's coming into play. But as of now, the story, fantastic. I love everything about it. This is the most fun I think I've had in the opening portion of an expansion. And again, that's part of the reason for that, is that it being so upbeat, it being funny, just makes it more fun to play the early parts of the story as compared to something like Shadowbringers, like Endwalker, where it's a slow burn until it hooks you, because you don't go into Shadowbringers like happy. That story like almost immediately hits you in the gut, like, oh god, it's gonna be one of those. And kind of the same thing with Endwalker, whereas Dawntrail, you're just vibing and you're going through, and it's like feels really well paced because of that. And that's another pro that I want to talk about, was the fact that it just feels very fun to go through because of how upbeat and funny it has been so far. They're while they are leaning into the comedy more, it's not reaching Hildebrand levels, though they are getting some inspiration from Hildebrand, which is a good thing. Again, comedy, it's a good choice. Good choice. Distinguishes itself from Endwalker, from Shadowbringers. Moving on, let's talk about the graphics update. That's another big part of what's making Dawntrail Dawntrail, is the graphics update. And game's beautiful. Game is absolutely gorgeous. You don't really think about the, especially if you're not a modder, if you're just a casual player, you didn't care how the old game looked. Yeah, some things looked odd, but when you do see it, you're like, holy hell, how did I play the old thing? This looks so, this is gorgeous comparatively. And I think almost universally people have loved it. Like, everything looks so much better. People's characters look better, except mine, because I'm a human. I look like a human. You can't really go much more than there. I got a little more light on my face, but that's beside the point. My Namazu looks better, but yeah, no, like the game just looks like beautiful. Obviously, we're gonna talk about the zones in a minute, but there's literally one of the cutscenes where, you know, a bunch of characters sitting on a bonfire, and I honestly, I thought it looked like a completely different game. Like, I don't know what it was about the lighting, but it just looked significantly better than 14 had any right to be. And I still don't know if I'm imagining it and I'm gaslighting myself that it looked that good. I think I am. I don't know if it looked that good, but it looked amazing to me. Like, yeah. So the graphics update, phenomenal. Like, everything is great. Everything looks pretty. With that, let's talk about the zones. So, again, as I mentioned in the story part, a big thing with the story of Dawntrail so far is exploring the continent, meeting its people, learning about their cultures. And to meet with that, or to go with that, all the zones really have to feel unique and different, and they do. Each one of the zones does feel so unique, and they're all beautiful. Another thing that I really like is that, in Shadowbringers, you had Amarang and Calusia, which were split into 2 different zones, but fundamentally they were basically the same thing. Like, yeah, bottom Calusia had a little bit more grass, top Calusia was more stone, but basically the same freaking thing. It wasn't that different. Same thing with Amarang. Left Amarang is the same as right Amarang. It's like nothing's different. There's mine shafts, but Dawntrail, like the areas are the split areas are rather different. Now, I might be gaslighting myself. This is probably where the recency bias is coming in, where I'm thinking they're significantly different, but really they're closer to the same. But to me, so far, they've looked very different, and I really love that. I love that you have these massive zones, because like zone wise, they're about Heavensward Stormblood level, where the zones are just absolutely massive, but they feel different. And it's not the Sea of Clouds, which is just a massive amount of the same thing. Like, one half is completely different than the other half, and it's just great. I can't talk. And I've only seen half of the areas, and I've talked to a couple of my FC members, and it's amazing how, like, you've only played like a third, and it already feels like the scale of everything makes it feel like we've already played through a whole expansion. Like, it's phenomenal, like, really. Now let's move on to the first dungeon and the trial, the kind of defining point of the early game. And I do have to say that the first dungeon and the first trial, fantastic, phenomenal, great. In fact, the first dungeon is probably one of my favorite first dungeons, and to be fair, that's not much competition. Really, it's only competing with Holminster Switch, which, don't get me wrong, very good dungeon, and I probably like it better from like a story perspective and the atmosphere, but the fights and just the feeling of, I can't say its name, that's a big problem with this expansion, I can't say any of the names, but the first dungeon of Dawntrail is phenomenal. It's like tied for my favorite first dungeon. Like I said, it's kind of hard to beat Holminster Switch. I do enjoy that dungeon and just the theme around it, but I enjoy the fights and the enemies in this dungeon significantly more, so I don't want to put one above the other, because I do love both. But it's a very fantastic first dungeon, and the second dungeon is just as good and even a little better than the first. But let's talk about the first trial. Now, the first trial for an expansion is very important. It kind of sets the expectation for the expansion. How are the fights going to be? What can we expect from the more difficult content going forward? And how, like, promising of an extreme does this look? And I have to say, it's great. You're noticing a pattern here. It's great. It's really interesting. It has some unique mechanics that I can only imagine are going to be very terrifying. Interesting is the correct word, but terrifying when we actually get to that extreme. And as always, the music is phenomenal. Now, unfortunately, it isn't my favorite first trial, and that's no fault to it, because my favorite trial is the first trial of Endwalker, and it's very hard to beat the first trial of Endwalker, because that like sets a whole tone for the expansion. It flipped everyone's idea of what's going to happen in Endwalker. However, it does take the new number 2 spot. It has officially surpassed Susanoo for me. I love the fight, I love the music, I love the design, I love the new mechanics introduced and how it uses certain things. I'm not going to go into details because I want you to experience it. But since we're talking about music, let's now move on to the music. It's no shock that Soken is a genius, but what will forever amaze me is the fact that how does this man surpass himself every expansion? I am not joking when I say Dawntrail has said some of the best music in 14. Like, normally going through an expansion, I'll pay attention to zone themes, but really, unless it's very distinctive, I don't really give it much attention. Like, I don't think about it too much. Like, Lakeland is a good song, but going through the story, it didn't catch my attention. Amarang, on the other hand, was a song that caught my attention immediately, and it's something that I had to listen to going through Shadowbringers. The same thing with Ratika Greatwood. Lahi became a big meme, and obviously Neath Dark Waters, Amarant's theme, another song that caught people's attention, and it just immediately comes to your mind, and I had to go listen to it. But outside of that, you know, Ilmeg, not really. Lakeland, not really. Clusia, not really. But, you know, zone themes just traditionally don't catch your attention that much outside of some few examples. Like Yangtze is another good one from the past that became very popular because it's so distinctive. That's not the case with Dawntrail. Like every zone theme and the main town theme, I literally anytime I just vibe with it. Like I'll come out of a cutscene and that Donkey Kong Country song like begins and I start vibing. I go to the main town. I just like start hearing some jazz. I vibe. I don't know how every zone theme has been so good, and I can only wait to hear the remaining zone themes. Like I just got to the third area and I heard the theme for that, and like I was like, holy hell, this is like the most unique zone theme I think he has made, just with how it begins. And I'm like really excited to see the remainder of the music, the remainder of the zones, which, you know, the zone music's usually not what I'm like. I'm not saying the zone music's bad. Like, so good, I love all of it. It's just I've never been excited to hear the zone themes, and now I am like extremely excited to hear the zone themes. And God, the first trial theme was fan-freaking-tastic, absolutely gorgeous, and it makes me so. I want to hear the next. Obviously, I could go listen to them. I'm not going to. I want to hear the next trial. I want to hear the final trial. I want to hear the raids. Oh, because boss music. Oh, I want to. But I have to wait for that. Battle theme's also very beautiful as well. Like, yeah, the music's just been great. I will, you know, say something that one of my FC members brought up is that they are recycling a bunch of old music for certain things, like Shadowbringers and Endwalker music, and I kind of get it. It's like they're using songs that we know that have specific emotional ties to it. It's like, oh, something bad is happening. We have like the Ascian theme or like something similar to that, and so they play it, and I get it, but it would have been nice to have newer versions of it, but that's not a big thing. But yeah, no. To no one's shock, Soken's a genius, and the music for the expansion is somehow better. Don't know how this man keeps getting away with creating more better and better songs each expansion. Last thing I want to talk about is really something I probably should have been at the beginning, and that's the launch itself. Now, obviously, after the events of Endwalker and the calamity that was its launch, people were justifiably kind of terrified going into Dawntrail, the horrors that was going to be like the getting into the game, and it's been good. Like queue times, fantastic, not bad. Like I mean, if you get in prime time, if you log in at prime time right now, you're not going to be able to you're going to be in a like 2,000 person queue if you're on a very populated server. But unlike Endwalker, where a 2,000 queue meant waiting 4 hours, you're in the game in like 30 minutes. Like that's not bad, like for any game. And you're not being kicked out of your place. If you get in the queue, you're staying in the queue. You're not randomly crashing in game. Like the game, like 14 has been pretty freaking stable for a like expansion release, which is amazing. Not to say that there haven't been issues. PlayStation players have been having problems because of refresh rates on certain monitors, though I think there is a way to fix that. There's been a very funny glitch with Sikris Tower that has since been fixed, where Amon would just instantly wipe the people because one of his mechanics wouldn't work. What has been dubbed Amon Ultimate. And then there's been some other like small things, but nothing too major has really gone wrong. This is probably one of the smoothest like expansion releases they have had, which is impressive, especially after all the DDoSes a while back. Maybe that had something to do with it. Final thoughts. So far, like I said, Dawntrail has been fantastic. It's been the most fun I've had with the beginning of an expansion. Though this video is being made with the idea of recency bias in mind, the whole idea is that while these might be my initial feelings, as I get near the end, they may change, or as I get near the expansion, I might think I'm a freaking idiot and I was wrong about everything I said in this video. Only time will tell. I'm also just a very optimistic person. But from the standpoint, my first impressions, if everything continues as good as I currently think it is, then we're looking forward towards a really good expansion, but only time will tell. We still have to see how they're going to handle the Bozja-like mechanic and the whole space adventure thing, but we're on a really good start. Oh wait, I forgot to mention queue times for content. Oh yeah, I'm a healer player, it doesn't affect me. Oh god, when I decide to level something that's not a healer. But all joking aside, thanks for watching me ramble for who knows how long when this is cut down. If you found this video interesting, please consider checking out some of my other videos, which are mostly guides, or even my streams for Dawntrail once you finish the story yourself. Again, I don't expect people to watch it until they finish themselves, but hey, you might want to watch my reactions. A couple other things of note is starting on the 2nd, I'll be streaming on Twitch instead of YouTube, at least temporarily. That way people can watch me to get the campaign mount if they're interested, because for those that don't know, starting on the 2nd with the official release of Dawntrail, if you watch 6 hours of a 14 stream that has a option enabled, you'll get a free mount, specifically the Butterfinger mount. I'll also be giving away Namazu codes throughout that streaming period, so come check me out on Twitch when I decide to do those streams. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I wish you the best on your 14 journey through Dawntrail.